Welcome everyone to Ecopsychology Café. Hello, my name is Carol Koziel. I'm the founder of the Canadian Ecopsychology Network, the host of this series. Monica Dragoz and I co-created this program. Today we're going to have an interesting conversation about bioethics, and I'm going to let one of our members, landscape architect Riel Aguchi, introduce the topic and our guest speakers.
Thank you, Carol. A bit of background. I attended a Jonathan Gustin Purpose Guides Institute webinar that actually Eleanor, who was here, she had the baby, recommended, and it featured Joanna Macy. And it just so happened that Dr. David Schenck and Dr. Larry Churchill presented their paper, 6 Maxims for a Marginally Habitable World in that webinar. And I was completely captivated simply because I've had a long-term fascination with end-of-life death. And I've given much thought and I've written a lot about the topic myself for landscape architecture magazines and how that relates to ecological unsustainability and related social eco issues. And I proposed to Carol that we discuss the 6 Maxims and better still, ask David and Larry to present and one of our sessions, and we are deeply grateful that they have accepted. I honestly was unfamiliar with the word maxim, and I believe Larry and David will provide their definition. To me, to make it easy for me, I view them as intentional practices and related to moral conduct. So about David and Larry, they wanted me to keep this short. I assume everybody's read their short bio. Both are bioethicists, primarily in the context of medicine and healthcare. Both have in-depth experience with teaching and clinical research and have published extensively. And they have extraordinary wisdom gained from many years of study and teaching of religion, as well as philosophy and ethics. So thank you, David and Larry, for sharing your wisdom with us here today. We are all excited to discuss the 6 ethical maxims.
Well, thanks, Riel, and thanks, Carol. And can you hear me? The green thing is still, okay, good. Wisdom, I don't know, but we're going to put out some ideas that have come to us through the practice of bioethics, through the experience in hospitals, through the experience in hospices. This is not a paper that came out of a literature search or an idea of contributing to literature. It was really as we tried to comprehend the climate emergency, we began to think about future generations in the sense of our students, our junior colleagues, the people that we had trained and worked with. And so the essay really began as almost a letter to these people. At the beginning, I said to Larry, I don't want another article about ethics of elements of strategies to meet the climate emergency. I think we need something that is directed to people and that suggests certain kinds of ways of living. I want it to be an existential paper. And so what we started out, and maybe Carol, we can start the slides now. Carol, you there? Thank you. And Carol, also, when we get to 20 minutes, will you like wave your hands or something so that we know where we are? Okay, great. Next slide. So in the Maxims essay, we challenged our colleagues. I'm going to say a little bit more about that in a moment. What are the moral resources that our field can offer? And part of the thought is that every field has something to offer. Ecopsychology as a field, looking at its practices now, might think what practices might be going forward, what they might be in the context of all the changes that are going to come with the climate emergency. So what we said in the beginning of the essay was, okay, we're your teachers. We've been doing this for a long time, but we have failed you because we haven't talked to you about this tsunami, this giant thing. Where are my hands? Yeah, this giant thing that is going to come in and completely change healthcare. We have taught you about how to work with individuals. We've taught you how to work at the end of life in the context of hospitals, but we as your elders have failed you. And so what we want to do right now is to try to describe as best we can what we think this tsunami is, and then to pull together in the best way that we can, what we've learned in the hospitals, what we've learned in hospice, what we've learned from the reading that we've done, and the understanding of religious traditions and understanding of philosophical traditions. And so we feel like we failed in a certain way. Here's this large thing that is coming, and Larry's done a great job in the middle of the essay to pull together the science information that was there in 2021 when we wrote this. And then we want to offer, make an offering. Here's what we can offer that you might be able to carry forward. And so, you do the slide, Carol. One way to summarize what is coming, apart from attempting to assimilate the science, is just to say, for the last 50 or 60 years, we have, especially in the Northern Hemisphere, enjoyed relative climate stability, relative public health stability, relative social and political stability, relative financial stability. But we can already see that these four stabilities are now beginning to change. We have the climate emergency that all of us are working with and are geared to. Public health, we had COVID as a kind of first test, but the epidemiologists are clear that we're going to have more pandemics, we're going to have more plagues. Many of them will be airborne. Many of them will be have greater levels of mortality than COVID. Drinkable water is now a huge problem in the Southern Hemisphere, and it's going to be a larger one. Air to breathe. I had a friend who we sent him a part of the essay, and he said, "You say here that some of this is a thought experiment. I'm looking out my window and I can see fires and I can't breathe when I go out the door." Don't say thought experiment. So social political, we're already seeing changes in many countries, movement towards authoritarian government, and increasingly increasing, at least in the United States, reliance on violence or threats of violence. And of course, don't have to look further than the Ukraine to think about that. And then finally, all three of those things will result in disrupted globalization in markets. And again, with the awful war in the Ukraine, we can see disruptions of food supply and oil supply. And so we thought, having presented this idea of what was coming, that we might try to offer something that might be useful to people. And this is when, as our writing came together, we thought, there's a genre, there's a way of working within philosophy that might be useful. And Larry, can you pick it up now? And Carol, if you could change the slide.
Yeah, thanks, David. So this is about the way in which maxims work and why we thought that using maxims was really a good way to go. So if you can distinguish between different kinds of ethical tools, rules tell us exactly what to do and not to do. Don't lie, it's very simple. Principles tell us how to think about the values involved in choosing. An example here would be lying disrespects those who are deceived. It doesn't tell you what to do, but it tells you how to think about the values involved in an action or a choice. Virtues, which are the oldest religious and philosophical tradition in ethics, speak to how we should be rather than what we should do. That is, what kind of person do we want to be? And it appeals to character. So if you're saying be truthful, you're talking about an inner capacity for veracity and for truth telling. That just is a part of who the person is. And we chose maxims because maxims are a kind of neglected tradition in modern philosophy and religious studies and in ethics generally, but they provide us with short sayings, memorable things that can be memorized and are easily remembered, and they have spiritual, typically, as well as ethical significance. Because like virtues, they speak to who we are, who we understand ourselves to be in the world. These are typically memorized for quick reference, and they're especially helpful in difficult times. So an example might be something like practice honesty in all things, just a way of being in the world that is easy to remember. So next slide, please. So how do maxims work? Well, as I said, they are brief sayings that are intended to guide actions. And they suggest actions and practices to which we can and should become habituated so that they become second nature to us. They're just the way we are in the world. They're ideas that have to be practiced in order to be fully understood. And the point to emphasize here is that maxims are not head work. They're not appeals to the intellect or the conceptual part of our understanding. And one gains an understanding of them as they are practiced and as they mature in our own sense of self in the world. So they're not, their meaning is not apparent from the beginning. They have to be worked on, practiced, embodied. And maxims are less about how to analyze and choose and more about how to be who one can be, with the idea that embodying the maxims, practicing the maxims, makes all of the choices that one may face, especially the very difficult ones, more easy and readily available so that we avoid a lot of consternation at critical points. So that's why we chose maxims. And I think we're ready for the next slide.
So let me say a little bit about how we came up with the 6 maxims. We didn't sit down, and this would be preposterous, really. We didn't sit down and say, okay, we're going to write 6 wise maxims, so let's do this. These arose from thinking about our colleagues, thinking about shared experiences, and then how might we put this together? And it came together in a way that we didn't expect. We didn't expect to have 6 maxims at the end of the paper, but it really just wrote itself in this direction. An important part, which isn't evident here, but it is clear in the paper, is there's the statement of a maxim, and then underneath that, there's a sorry, I have a tremor. Hey, that is on mind. And then underneath that, there's a statement of the basis for the maxim, and underneath that, a statement of the extrapolation. And so there are these slogans here, but there's a thought process that goes with them. And we suggest that it would be possible in any field to do a similar kind of thing. What kind of basis, what the extrapolation might be. The other thing to say is putting the maxims together was as much a literary problem as a philosophical problem. Now that may sound weird, but maxims should be short. They should be something that people can remember when they don't have a chance to pick up Immanuel Kant or David Hume or some big fat philosophy book, but in the middle of whatever is going on. And they should also start with an injunction. So it's work hard, cultivate, have, appreciate, train, act. These are suggestions for how to act to convey the idea that these are practices that can only be learned and deepened through doing them. So we want to talk briefly about each of them, and then we're interested definitely in the Q&A and how that's all going to go. So the first maxim: work hard to grasp the immensity. Part of the grounding of this was for us our work in intensive care units, where you would have a patient or a family member, let's say in the ICU, a family member being told something that is unimaginable. They weren't ready for the patient's death. They weren't ready to make a decision about withdrawing life support or not. And you had to give people a chance to absorb it and a chance to work on it. They might remember only one phrase, the one phrase that suggested hope. They might remember only one phrase about the procedure. So the extrapolation from that was the climate emergency is huge. The climate emergency is beyond anybody's ability to comprehend. Think of the person that you think has worked on this for the longest and knows the most about it. Let's just pick Bill McKibben. He's still sitting there going, this is bigger than anything I've ever seen. And so if you're feeling that, he's feeling the same thing. So it takes work. You can't just sit there and have it flow over you, but you have to work hard here and share that work with other people. You also have to work on your own reactions, your grief, your anger, your guilt, your hope, sometimes your joy. Larry?
Okay. Cultivate radical hope is in some ways the most difficult, I think, for people. It certainly is for me. What this means, I think, is overcoming a kind of typical facile understanding of optimism that seems to pervade Western societies. That is the idea, well, things are going to work out. I don't understand quite how, but they always do. And, maybe we'll technologize our way out of this situation. One has to give that up. That's not going to happen. There will be technologies that will help us, but they're not going to remove the catastrophic events that we're facing over the next several decades. So by radical hope, we mean the hope that comes into being after one has given up being optimistic about an outcome, and the kind of hope that won't be tied to an outcome. It's not necessarily a hope for something, nearly so much as it is adopting a posture or a demeanor of hope, so that one can hold on that there may be something good which is yet unimaginable, which can come from this. And people need hope to survive. It's very, very clear. And hope is going to be challenged in a way that for our species has never happened before. So this is why the hope has to be radical. And this is why, of course, it needs to be discussed in communities who will talk about their hopes being dashed and what kind of hopefulness they can now have. David?
have a line in the sand. Again, the experiential base here is advanced directives, right? You or your parents probably have gone through a process of saying, when I come to my life's end, I will please do this and please don't do that. Please don't resuscitate me in these circumstances, please do. And so that's a kind of a, we will not do these kinds of things no matter what is going on. And then the extrapolation of that would be, what are you in a time of social transition and political transition, possibly shortage of food, shortage of water in different parts, partly what I think we can expect is significant refugee populations. How am I going to do things there? And so, you know, a kind of rudimentary one is, I want still food from children. Okay, that's a good one. I will die before I will do the following kinds of things. For places in the country where guns are a common thing, you might say, okay, I have hunting guns in the house and I might use those, but I'm not going to go get an AK-47 and bulk up my house and put in metal plates and bullet glass. So think through your life and think about what you might do and not do, and realize that there may be times that you would choose to die rather than to have certain results. And in the essay, we give some examples of people who have given that advice to their students, and some essays. But yeah, there we are. Larry?
Okay, appreciate the opportunity of this time. Sounds a little strange, but in a sense, it's a correlate to the first one. Work hard to grab the immensity, because a part of the immensity is the opportunity that we have. Opportunities actually to ground ourselves as human in a very fragile world. And as someone just put up on the screen, realize that Mother Earth is not a metaphor. We have the opportunity to do that in a way that no one in my history or human history perhaps has ever done. So what's going on now in Egypt with COP27 is a battle between whether 1.5 or some kind of higher standard will be adopted as the metrics for moving forward as the goal. And so the opportunity now is to say 1.5, we understand that is an important goal. And as one of the participants said, every fraction of a degree in increase about what we can achieve involves the lives of tens of millions of people. So setting it at 1.7 or even 2 means that hundreds of millions of people will eventually die from the results of this. So we have an opportunity to do something extraordinary and to experience something extraordinary that our species, at least in its recorded history, has never done. So tremendous opportunities if we can just seize upon them and come to our senses. David?
I'd like to add just a couple of things to that. One of the other opportunities that we have is to ask questions like, should trees have standing? Shouldn't we be bringing into our community the standing ones, the four-leggeds, the two-leggeds, or the winged? We have an opportunity at this time, or we're being forced at this time, to open ourselves as, you know, modern Western people, open ourselves to all that's around us in a way that we had not been encouraged to do before. And so look at the trees around you and look at what magnificent presences they are, and how many of those we've already lost and how many will be lost again. This is a chance to open our eyes because of the force of what is coming. Okay, train your body and your mind. This has in particular to do with the idea that in stressful situations, our bodies and our mind, our spirit are going to be pressed in a way that they haven't ever been pressed before. And we know this, again, looking at hospitals during COVID, especially when people are overwhelmed with suffering around them. They experience moral distress, they experience burnout, their bodies are hammered with, their bodies soak suffering that is around them, just by the way it is, just by touching bodies that have been damaged, by having fluids over your hands or hopefully over your gloves, right? You absorb things and your mind is challenged. And so the idea would be have mindfulness practices, have yoga practices, have prayer practices, have rituals that are shared in community so that everyone can rebalance together. Learn kinds of things that will rebalance your body and practice them ahead of time. Start now. All of these things can be done now. One of the things that Joanna Macy said when we first talked about this on the phone was, I love these because they're practical. Anybody can do them. You don't have to have special training, and you can start right now. Larry.
Okay, this is the last one, act for future generations of all species. I think what we want to emphasize here is that while it is natural to think about the well-being of your children and grandchildren and perhaps a circle of close friends, we're always thinking about their future. What kind of spiritual or material legacy are we leaving? That's too narrow a focus. And so we have to have within our ambit really, I think, all living things. There's a sense in which we are so deeply rooted in the earth, not sitting on the earth, but rooted in the earth. We're part of it. The earth is alive and everything around us is alive. And one of my favorite authors on this is E.O. Wilson, the Harvard entomologist who died, I think, just last year, who had this term biophilia he used to describe the inherent kind of affinity we feel with everything that's alive if we just let ourselves walk out in nature and understand them. So it's like saying if the coral reefs die and if all the bees die and species of animals die, we are gone too. We are deeply rooted in their survival in the same way that we were deeply rooted in even the possibility that we could emerge from the earth and other life forms. So we're all in this together. Okay.
So a couple of comments in closing. The process has begun. The climate emergency is here. The floods in Pakistan are just the beginning of what we're going to see. The wildfires in California, the stresses where you have California needing lots of firefighters, but then major fires in Colorado, Idaho, who had already sent their people to California. Multiple stressors on a system, bigger storms, more storms, storms that sit still and dump more and more rain. What do you call them? Snow bombs, I was in the South, so I didn't get one. But anyhow, the coal that just kind of sits there, probably on Alberta, it's already here. And we can also see that some of the, one of the most dangerous things in this process, the numbing process, has already begun. We saw it with COVID, the number of deaths. And in the beginning, it was like, oh, it's horrible. 10,000 people have died. Oh, it's horrible. 100,000 people have died. But then after a while, it seemed that it was a numbing process, and we just kept on going, doing what we're doing. I think this is one of the great dangers. And after that, and alongside that, there are going to be more and more temptations to violence, more and more temptations to ruthlessness. And so part of the reason that, or part of what we hope for, part of our intention with Maxims, is to say, this is the kind of thing that would help keep morality alive, because I think we're going to be coming into spaces where that we've seen before, concentration camps among them, in certain refugee areas. Moral discourse and moral behavior gets to be very difficult. And so there's going to be a repeated set of pressures that ask us to say, what kind of person do we want to be? What kind of family do we want to raise? What kind of community do we want to be in? What kind of community do we want to nurture? And we put these things out not as great conclusions, but really as a place to start discussion. We really started out thinking it would be for our colleagues in bioethics, and some work is continuing with that. One journal has a symposium devoted to the article, but we're grateful that it's expanded or been taken up by a larger community. But part of the discussion would be, okay, we want some other maxims. Or, okay, these guys have missed the point. They're talking, Rael was asking a question yesterday or day before about had we narrowed this to social, and was there a way it should be broadened? And so what we really hope for is the beginning of a discussion, and let's start that now, Carol.